Metal Eden is the latest game by developers Raycon. Fast-paced, first-person shooter where you're playing as an elite android, all in a futuristic setting fighting back against powerful cybernetic enemies. And in a year where we've been really starving for some solid shooters, this thing is easily one of the best offerings we've had so far. Yeah, I've played through this thing and beaten it twice now, and while it might not be a perfect experience, this is one of those instances where it shows that if a game can just make the core components fun to engage with, well then you really don't need to do, well, that much else. So let's talk about it then, shall we?
Targets neutralized.
Before we get too much further into things though, I do have to stop and take a moment to thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video. War Thunder is the biggest and most comprehensive vehicular combat game of all time, available for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile devices. With an all-new mobile version available now for iOS and Android, allowing you to bring the battlefield with you, featuring intuitive controls, impressive graphics, and that all-familiar, massively multiplayer warfare gameplay. Letting you take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, ships, and choppers, with 10 major nations to choose from, ranging from things like biplanes and armoured cars that are older than your parents, through to modern fighter jets and battle tanks, with a combination of detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects, giving players a boatload of customization features with different kinds of camouflage, markings, and decorations, even including ones created by the community. You don't need any kind of special control or a joystick either, and just can hop right into things with a mouse and keyboard. Designed with optimization in mind using their in-house engine, which is heavily optimized to provide a lag-free experience. All backed by a community worldwide of over 95 million players to truly create some epic PvP battles. And with an unmatched wealth of high-quality content here to play around with, there's really no better game for people who are fans of military history. There's even a bonus pack for new and returning players that haven't played in over 6 months, with a bunch of premium vehicles and an exclusive decorator. With the Eagle of Valor decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of a premium account. You'll even get a 50% experience income booster. So yeah, dog, to check out War Thunder today, use my link to sign up and get that massive free bonus pack for either PC or consoles. Available for a limited time though, so yeah, don't miss out. Now, the premise in Metal Eden is set at some point in the far future, at a time where mankind's had to leave Earth after we've buggered the place up beyond all repair. So, going off the current trajectory of world events, I'm guessing another 5 to 10 years. Anyway, we're now in this utopian city in space called Mobius, where people have been able to transfer their consciousness into something called cores, which basically what would happen if you uploaded your personality and all of your memories onto an SD card.
Introducing the core. Using the latest advancements in biotechnology, we can digitize what makes us human.
But yeah, like I've seen enough science fiction stuff to know that anything that's named after a reference to something in the Bible's probably not going to end well. And yeah, surprise, surprise, as it turns out, it didn't. And all this project is really about is keeping people in storage without ever actually letting them out. The protagonist at the center of all of this is a woman named Asuka, a so-called hyper unit. Basically, a bodacious-looking android who's also been fully digitized, with her mind able to be uploaded into different combat shells whenever she's killed, with Asuka being unique in that she's able to retain her memories each time.
Now you understand the importance of our mission.
With there being all these weird machine-like characters that she interacts with, given titles like the Nexus, the Engineers, or the Overseer. Along with this hostile force she has to constantly battle that you're in charge of protecting Mobius from attacks. With the cause of all these countless humans all trapped in this digital realm being the main objective of the entire story, with Asuka ultimately trying to free them, somehow.
Remember, this is a rescue operation.
Along with getting a bunch of cryptic flashbacks and other glimpses into her past before all of this stuff took place, you know, just to make it even more confusing. Overall, the missions take place mostly on Mobius, but then also the nearby planet that it orbits, named Vulcan. With there being quite a lot of story stuff going on here, which I will admit I did find pretty hard to follow. I mean, it's all very Matrix meets Ghost in the Shell meets Alita Battle Angel, and if nothing else, it's definitely a unique premise. They do a good job as well of making sure that most of this exposition takes place at the beginning of a level, or during those short moments when you get a breather from all of the combat, ensuring the entire campaign has a steady pace and never feels like it's getting bogged down with one element or the other.
For the first time in a long time, I feel a glint of hope.
At its heart though, this is a first-person shooter through and through, and like so many others before it in recent memory, it's one where it's hard to not make comparisons to Doom Eternal. And yeah, like I know I do this in every second video, but it's really hard not to when so many of the elements are there. I mean, you got basic things like fast movement speed, fast weapon swapping, dashing and double jumping, along with a whole bunch of platforming elements. Enemies are either super tough and dangerous, requiring specific strategies to beat, but then you've also got these weaker fodder enemies that run around that are really just there as a means to manage your resources and abilities. You know, similar to the fodder demons, which serve the purpose of being turned into walking ammo, armor, or health pickups. We've got a spare lives system in place similar to the one in Doom Eternal, where if your health is dropped off, instead of dying, you simply get back up on your feet and keep fighting. And then even the grenade in this thing freezes enemies that are hit by it, you know, a lot like the ice bomb did.
They're the same picture.
How about that power-up called Overdrive, which makes all your weapons hit harder and faster, you know? I mean, quad damage, anyone? And then the second level of the campaign set on Vulcan may as well be set on Mars, because it has a very similar looking red-themed landscape that you're exploring and navigating. In fact, at that point, it's also like it turns into Metroid Prime, with Asuka able to turn into a ball and roll around to either get around quicker or also attack enemies with electricity and homing missiles. Even having to roll through all these environments covered in lava. I mean, what is this, magma caverns? You could even argue as well that Asuka's appearance is very Samus inspired too, having her decked out in this super high-tech armor where only her face is visible, which also reminds me of someone else's armor. But then what it also shares in common with Doom Eternal is that feeling of reaching that so-called fun zone. You know, what Hugo Martin described as getting to the point where everything clicks and you find yourself in that sweet spot, where you start swapping back and forth between all of your weapons and then using all of the different tools and abilities at your disposal. And it's the old, I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me kind of vibe. That right there is where Metal Eden excels, if you can manage to get there. As for the visual aspect though, well, overall, this thing couldn't look further from Doom Eternal if it tried. And the first thing that instantly stuck out to me was just how unique the presentation really was. Yeah, it is worth mentioning that this is an absolutely awesome looking game, and one of the few times I've seen the Unreal Engine 5 put to good use. Just got such an appealing and vivid art style with some insanely gorgeous environments that you move through, and I really did lose count of the amount of times here that I found myself stopping to just take the whole thing in. A frequent component to the storytelling aspect is Asuka riding along these zipline things where, can't tell if it feels like I'm riding the skyhooks in Bioshock Infinite or about to be taken up to meet Dr. Breen in Half-Life 2. Either way though, these moments are really cool, giving you this fast-paced tour through all of these high-tech locations, and it really never does get visually boring. It also kind of reminds me a little bit of how Bungie's upcoming Marathon looked, only if the art style wasn't plagiarized from someone else. Plus, it's also one of the few times I've seen reflections and light bouncing off surfaces in this engine where it doesn't look completely out of place or detached from reality. And the way that it seems to use these vibrant primary colours makes each level feel different from the last, which also helps to distinguish enemies from the background during combat, which is very important. I also can't help but compare this to another similar cyberpunk-themed first-person shooter with Deadlink, with it also having a familiar theme, but then a similar looking assortment of robotic and cybernetic enemies to contend with. You often get this really cool slow motion effect here when you kill the last enemy, which is something that Deadlink also did as well.
They're the same picture.
It is a bit of a shame that there ain't that much side stuff to check out here though, and outside of a couple distractions here and there, the missions are really just these giant long corridors, with there not even being that many secrets you can even find. But Raycon showed with Ruiner that they really know how to create these striking and gorgeous backdrops, and yeah, that's something they've achieved here yet again with Metal Eden.
We've learned our lesson.
But the real core of the gameplay here is quite literally the cores, because Asuka's got this nasty ability to be able to rip those things out of someone's body and have it land right in the palm of her hand, which then gives you a few options. For starters, you can either throw it at enemies like a grenade, which then has the benefit of also making them drop ammo pickups. Otherwise, you can absorb it, which restores health and armor, but then also buffs up your next melee attack into a super punch. You know, kind of like the blood punch in Doom Eternal. Oops, there I go again. And this is handy because a super punch will knock off an enemy shield in a single hit. It is kind of annoying though that you can't store these away for when you actually want to use them, and after having absorbed a core, you've got about 10 or so seconds before it just fizzles out. In fact, even just grabbing a core in general has about 10 or so seconds before it falls apart. It's like the old saying goes, use it before you lose it. The other thing is that early on here, the cooldown time for ripping out cores is super long, like 30 seconds long, until you get an upgrade that drops it down to 15 seconds. Which, honestly, is probably what it should have been from the beginning, given that so many crucial mechanics are tied to it, and also considering that all of the tougher enemies pretty much require the super punch to deal with effectively. Throwing it as a makeshift grenade, I mean, is one of the main ways to get ammo back, which does also become an issue in regards to resource management. Considering you're probably going to need to use that punch, though, far more than you will the throw. Which I guess is why half of the arenas have these respawning ammo pickups, like it's Unreal Tournament or something. Either way though, I guess my point is just to mention that the combat does become better once you get that crucial upgrade to reduce the cooldown time, which does mean that the first hour or so can feel kind of basic. Because your only other method to quickly knock off an enemy shield is to stun them with a basic melee attack, which for some reason doesn't always seem to register, basically just giving the enemies a free hit. And then shortly after that, when you're about 3 levels into the game, you get the plasma rifle, which knocks the shields off even faster, kind of making that basic melee move completely redundant. Fuck you! Not to mention, you've also got a grenade ability which freezes enemies in place, giving you much needed breathing room when you're getting swamped by more men at once than your mum's got in her DMs. Still though, you're going to be ripping cores out here like you're collecting pogs, and it forms the main central focus of the combat loop, with the other 50% being about just shooting more or less everything that moves. The main enemy force here is the IDC, who are also hyper units similar to Asuka that have gone rogue, owned by all these corporations that are responsible for the Eden Project. Originally brought to Mobus to help protect humanity, but now they're just another hazard that's a threat to our survival. And the way that the combat works here is you're either doing kinetic damage or energy damage. If an enemy has a shield, then you're going to want to use an energy weapon to knock it off quicker, and then you swap to a kinetic weapon to finish them off. Make sense?
Got the gist.
It is kind of funny though how the game often makes a big deal out of introducing all of these new tougher enemy types when you first encounter them, only for them to just eat their own shit within a couple of seconds.
It's better we stay out of his sight.
A few moments later.
And the reason for that is because the same strategies pretty much work for all of them, in that all you need to do is knock off that shield and then just finish them off with any other weapon. And once you figure out how all of that works, it does become pretty easy to get into a rhythm where the game never really offers up that much of a challenge. Having said that though, like, there's definitely enemies in here that just feel unbalanced, like they're not even quite finished being designed yet. One in particular is more or less like a robotic T-Rex, and no matter how I time my dodges or how mobile I seem to be, I always seem to end up getting hit by these things. Along with these fucking drone things you take on here as well, which are just super annoying. If only for the fact that I find robotic flying enemies to be the absolute bottom of the creative barrel. Luckily though, you get a pretty cool arsenal to take out all of these enemies, with you having all of these weapons by about the halfway mark, really just giving you free reign from there on in. You start off with Asuka's auto pistol, which is more or less just a submachine gun, having infinite ammo and never needing to be reloaded, only overheating if it's fired too much. It does start off being pretty pathetic, but with a couple of upgrades, even later on in the game, it's still surprisingly handy against most enemies and makes a good fallback weapon in a pinch. Second one you're going to find is the Magnum pistol, which is more or less like a hand cannon, doing decent damage and being really useful at tagging the many flying drones that like to hover off in the distance like complete dickheads.
Second wave incoming.
After that, there's the shotgun, which is okay and does a decent bit of damage, but it's really only useful at point-blank range. And seeing as getting in too close to enemies usually ends up with you getting smashed in the face, I didn't find myself using this one so much. Especially because the one you get after this, the plasma rifle, is far more useful, being the first gun the game gives you where you can effectively knock off an enemy's shield. And considering all the biggest and the baddest dudes in this game have a giant shield on them, this is quickly going to become one of the most useful weapons. After that, you get another submachine gun, which does seem a bit odd in the sense that maybe it should have been like a heavier cannon or something, like an assault rifle. And I found this to be just a slightly more damaging version of the auto pistol, just one that fires slower and has to be reloaded. It's not that it's a bad gun, but it does just seem to be a variation on what that auto pistol already does. The grenade launcher though, which you soon get after this, is hands down one of the best weapons in the whole game. And that whole kinetic and energy damage thing just goes out the window here, with this beast taking a huge chunk out of everyone regardless. Wowee! Yeah, dog, easily the most damaging single-shot weapon in the game, and one you're absolutely going to be swapping back and forth to when you get it. And then finally, you've got the lightning gun that feels like it's been stripped right out of Quake 3, which fires out a steady stream of lightning, no shit, damaging enemies and also knocking their shield off super quickly. Does use the same ammo type as the plasma rifle, which makes sense, meaning this one really comes down to the situation. I mean, the lightning gun's obviously better at taking on people at close range, whereas the plasma rifle is far better suited for shooting at something hanging off back in the distance. Either way though, this is a pretty damn tidy roster of weapons, and it's definitely a quality over quantity kind of situation. Then every now and then you'll find a Gatling laser, which gives you 10 or so seconds of infinite ammo to completely tear ass. And overall, I love the animations and the modeling for pretty much all of these. Not to mention I appreciate how you can quickly understand the situations when each of these are going to be the most effective. To make it a little bit more complex, you've also got to consider the different mods that come with each of these guns as well. Now, this is what's more or less the alternate fire modes, with there being 2 for each weapon, able to be purchased through a separate interface using a resource called dust you find throughout the levels. Yeah, dust.
Anybody? No. Dust. Anybody? No. Dust.
And I love it too how the upgrades actually affect how the weapons look, adding new visual components to the side of them and all that kind of stuff. The catch is that you're definitely not going to be able to afford every single mod in here, so it does pay to actually make sure you're getting something that you're going to enjoy using. The pistol, for instance, has a mod that charges up a really powerful shot which can also chain to nearby enemies, or then the other one which fires out mini rockets that home in on enemies instead. The shotgun has a burst fire mode where you can quickly get off 3 shots one after the other, or another mode which fires out piercing pellets that bounce around. Then with the plasma rifle, you're charging this thing up with each shot to then either fire off a super damaging blast or another one that freezes enemies around you. Though, how they didn't even think to include the option to shatter frozen enemies here, I've got no idea.
That's a shame.
Or another example is with the lightning gun, how you can turn this into what's more or less a railgun, using up extra energy to fire off a single powerful blast.
Impressive.
So yeah, like there's quite a few different options in there depending on your own preference, with there being 2 further upgrades tied to each mod as well. But what you quickly come to realise is that they're really just a much of a muchness at the end of the day. I mean, I played through this thing twice, deliberately choosing the alternate mod for each weapon with my second playthrough. And about all it changed was the kind of damage I was doing to enemies. It's not like either one of them seem to be more effective than any of the others, and you certainly don't have to use these to deal with certain enemies. Like, it's not a case of the microwave beam in Doom Eternal, for instance. Just kind of like, hey, do you want your plasma rifle to shoot out an energy bomb, or do you want it to freeze enemies? That's the only decision. The complete opposite, however, cannot be said about all of the player upgrades. Now, this is another separate mechanic where you can choose from a single core every now and then to put into one of Asuka's abilities, and some of these are genuinely superior to some of the others. For instance, upgrading the damage that exploding cores do, or upgrading the amount of armor you get from absorbing one. I mentioned earlier too how the best one of these by far is that one that reduces the cooldown time for ripping cores out to begin with. And yeah, if you're not beelining for that upgrade first and foremost, I hate to tell you, you're playing the game wrong. But then on the flip side, you've got these other ones which seem far less useful. One of the first ones you're likely to get is this slow motion ability, kinda like a bullet time mode, which, I don't know, I guess is supposed to help with your aiming if you're getting overwhelmed. Only it runs off the same fuel source you use for dashing and jumping. Two mechanics, by the way, that you are going to be using a whole lot more and want to have spare fuel for. In fact, about all I used slow motion for was every now and then against those flying drones. And being able to slow down time so I could really line up my shots against these things was really helpful. It definitely at least looks pretty awesome though, and being able to see stuff like the gore and violence up close in slow motion when you're blasting someone and you shit cut up is pretty awesome. As for the others, well, there's like another upgrade that makes it so every time your armor gets knocked off, you let out an AoE blast that freezes enemies around you. Which, yeah, like, sounds cool, but then consider you've already got both an ice grenade and an ice blast mod for the plasma rifle, so yeah, that does make this seem kind of redundant. I guess if nothing else, it will at least make each playthrough a lot different. So experimenting with all of these at the end of the day, it's not going to be the end of the world. I just kind of wish they'd let you respec these if you change your mind later on, because as it is, once you've got one and you picked it, you're fucked. The final aspect we need to talk about is the platforming, because like so many other first-person shooters recently, this is one of those where it thinks it's a good idea in between all of the combat stuff to have you running around on walls or double jumping across ledges and grapple points. Along with those bits where you're on those zipline things, moving about in autopilot mode and listening to exposition.
I've been doing it for so long.
And look, like these are perfectly fine, but it is that issue again where they're ultimately unfailable. Because Metal Eden is another one of those games that makes it where if you fall off a ledge, instead of dying you lose a slither of your health points and then just reappear back on the nearest platform like it barely ever happened. And I still don't know how I feel about this in gaming. I mean, look, I get that it's trying to alleviate frustration from failing these platforming sections, but it's like, are we that far removed from including challenge in games anymore? What happened to the good old days, man, of letting people die if they fell off something in a video game? For something that's otherwise really challenging, relentless and unforgiving, it's just so odd to me how it then includes these sections where failure is met with a slap on the wrist. I don't know, at least if nothing else, include the option, right? Now they do at least incorporate combat into these sometimes, so it's not completely boring. But I don't know, man, like running along a wall for the 50th time and knowing that falling off is only going to end in a 10 HP penalty is about as threatening as the sight of a toddler armed with a sword made out of feathers. And I'm not asking for crushing Ghost Runner levels of platforming challenge here, where I need to try something 20 times to get past it, but even the odd death here and there would have really done wonders for these sections, and actually added some degree of fear or tension with the actual threat of falling to your death. There are a few other issues I had with this thing that also chafed my willy. For instance, I really dislike these sections where you got to activate some kind of machine or something by standing in one spot multiple times to slowly get it started. Because in a game where standing still can spell death in seconds, this just seems like the antithesis of what the combat's supposed to be about. I mean, they probably put this stuff in intentionally to mess with the player, but either way, it's like putting a lawn bowl sequence in a Sonic the Hedgehog game. The other one is in terms of the UI, where I think it's really kind of dumb how they show your reserve ammo on the actual weapon. And I understand that it's a design choice to show the ammo on the gun itself. I get it, plenty of games do this, it's fine, but for something this fast-paced, it kind of makes it tricky to see in a pinch. Especially when you're leaping all over the place during combat where shit's flying all over the screen. It just doesn't make any sense to do this in a game like this. But even if you are, for aesthetic reasons or whatever else, again, at least include the option to customize it. I mean, there is a reason why 99% of shooters put things like health and ammo in the exact same positions on the screen. But the biggest blunder that Metal Eden has is that when you finish the campaign, that's it. You get thrown right back to the main menu without so much as a pat on the back or a reach around. Even though the game has a mission selection option, and that you'll likely still be missing upgrades for all of the weapons and Uska, if you go back to any earlier checkpoints, it completely wipes your progress. It removes all of your upgrades, your abilities, your weapons, everything, and you got to start all over again.
Why?
Now, it's not a super long game, and like my first playthrough took me about 5.5 hours on hard mode, but not having the option to go back and replay missions with all of your stuff carrying over, along with the absence of a New Game Plus mode or anything like that, is just a colossal fuck up. And I really hope that they patch this in because it really is wasted potential. I remember that the RoboCop game did the same thing, but luckily Taeon had the good sense to include it in a future update, even if they did again leave it out of that recent expansion pack. I just also wish too there were more combat options outside of the main story. Like you get these random moments during certain levels where you're ambushed by enemies and have to clear them all out. And I think a series of challenge maps based around that concept in smaller arenas you can play over and over would have been really cool. You know what I mean? Maybe with a timer and leaderboards and a bunch of stuff like that, which would have really incentivized people to keep playing. You know, just giving us anything to do outside of that main story. But I guess, you know, having someone wanting more of something is about the best problem a video game could ever have, right? And this is one of those games where as soon as I beat it, all I wanted to do was just go right back in there and replay it from the beginning.
Proceed.
Metal Eden might not be the deepest, the longest, or the most complex shooter I've ever played, but what it does very well. The visual spectacle side of things is amazing, the story is interesting and captivating, and it absolutely nails those combat elements where it matters most. I can't see it smashing sales records or completely changing the way we look at the genre, but the people who do pick this one up are gonna have an awesome time with it. It's just a fucking kick-ass game, man. And believe me, in 2025, we absolutely need more of them. So yeah, go pick it up right now, bitch.
Target's down.
Yeah, and before I head off, I do have to once again thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video. To check War Thunder out today, don't forget, use my link to sign up and you can get that massive free bonus pack for the PC or consoles. All available for a limited time, so yeah, don't miss out.